What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic. And I'm going to explain why this topic has come to me and why I want to talk about it. But we're going to be talking about the history and purpose of acting, of theater, of movies. And I want to explain why this came up, why this came about, why I started thinking about movies and acting. And there's two kind of main reasons why I started thinking about this. And basically, what I'm going to be trying to get to in this video is answering the question of whether or not the inherent idea of acting, of drama, of fiction, of movies is just inherently to muddy the waters, to be inherently deceptive. Because ultimately, what is acting anyways? It's pretending to be something that you're not, which I know we don't think about it this way, but it's ultimately people professionally deceiving, lying. I mean, for entertainment purposes, and we understand what it is, but I'm just starting to think about why it's so prevalent and what are the psychological effects of imbibing all of this acting, and you're inviting people to be on screen to pretend to deceive so you can get, and you walk away from a really good movie that you think is really good, like, man, that was so believable. It's like you want to be fooled. What is that doing to us mentally, emotionally, in terms of the broader system, in terms of the deception that we then have to face currently, and when we go on to the next level, when we move out of these bodies? So it's just, I've been thinking about that a lot. Now, one of the reasons why I started thinking about this is actually I'm on a trip right now with my family. I'm in Costa Rica, and I was watching a movie with my niece and nephew. And I don't watch a lot of movies nowadays, and we're going to get to why that is in a second. But I sat down and they wanted to watch the Avengers, Infinity Wars and Endgame. And I had seen Infinity Wars a while back, and I actually thought it was kind of cool. This is a long time ago, like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. Anyway, so we sat down to watch it, and I'm watching this movie, and maybe Avengers, these types of movies are the best example of good acting, I suppose. It's a superhero movie. I'm not saying the actors are bad. They're just really well-known, good actors in that movie, but it's that type of movie. It's a little cheesy. It's a kid's movie, kind of, even though there's a lot of action and gore and violence, but you know what I'm saying. And I just started watching it, and I'm like, man, what am I watching? Just the over dramatization and these moments where they're gathering together, and you're like, wow, they're so brave, and because this guy's sacrificing his life and they care so much, and it just seems so funny to me. The whole thing just seemed bananas, and I just started thinking, what am I doing? This is silliness, and I'm watching this, and people are watching this, and it's just so fake. And what is that doing to me, to kids that eat this stuff up? And why are we spending so much time immersing ourselves in these fantasy worlds as opposed to looking around at the real world that is probably so complex and crazy and full of mysteries and potentially unsettling truths? Like, why aren't we focused on that? Is that by design? Probably is. So this is one of the reasons why I started thinking about this. And then the other reason is that lately, as I mentioned, I haven't been watching a lot of movies because nothing is interesting to me. And nothing may be a bit of an extreme, but very little is interesting to me. Like, I enjoy podcasts. I enjoy real discussions. I enjoy mixed martial arts, which is the one sport that I like. But when it comes to movies or TV shows, I just can't get into anything. Now, obviously, part of that is because I think most shows or movies, they happen in our world or some sort of very similar world, but there's no acknowledgement of these larger spiritual questions that we're all immersed in and that we're all obsessed with. And so a lot of the topics or issues covered in shows now feel very trivial and silly and whatnot. You know, that's certainly part of it. But I'm also wondering if now, as I'm examining these bigger questions, And we're really having a deep think about how everything in this world is likely structured in some way to keep us in the matrix, in the system, and distracted. Maybe I'm starting to think, hey, these movies feel as though they're part of this system of noise and distraction, and that's causing me not to want to engage with them. I don't know. It's probably a combination of things. But then this got me thinking about the bigger picture, about acting in general, forget about Hollywood, right? Forget about movies nowadays, which certainly there's propaganda and messages that that the powers that be want to communicate to the public. They're embedded within these movies, certainly in so many movies and media. I mean, this is not new for those of us in this community, but it's not even about that. It's a bigger question of, is the entire endeavor of acting, of drama, is this at its core manipulative? Meaning, is this widespread idea of, let's make it commonplace and normal and part of society for us to pretend to be something that we're not, and then have people watch it and enjoy it? Is that priming our minds for deception or for being deceived? Does that make us more susceptible to deception? Does that affect our discernment? And I don't know the answer to that, but this is a question that I'm curious about. And I have a suspicion that it might be some priming of the mind for nefarious purposes, clouding our judgment with all of this fakeness. You even think about, you guys ever think about this? Just think about the media, which so many people are tuning out now, and we're going to maybe independent sources or all sorts of different ways of acquiring information as opposed to the mainstream news. But do you ever think about how it became a trend? It still exists today on NBC, ABC, on all these news channels, even in local news stations. I remember growing up watching the news in Detroit. It's still the same thing. All these broadcasters and newscasters, they have fake voices. Welcome to the news, and in today's story, let's get down. What is that? That's so weird. Why, when you're just speaking normally, do people like, it's such a bizarre thing? Why do we have to have this fake level and layer of voice projection that is commonplace throughout? It's bonkers. It's weird. It's so weird. And I don't watch that stuff anymore anyways, but it's just so weird. Is that just something that came about? I mean, certainly we could say that, oh, it's a style, it's a trend, and it caught on. But I got to wonder too, is there some deeper rationale or reason as to why this did catch on and why this whole idea was pushed? Just one more layer or nonsensical thing of deception, of fakeness. Again, I don't know, but these are all the things that I think about that are there underneath the surface, whether it's by grand design or it just kind of fit what is intended to be there and then was held on to in some grand scheme of things. I don't know exactly how it came about, but all of these things seem to be in there to constantly keep us in a world full of fakeness and artificial nonsense and deception. This is all what got me thinking about this stuff. Now, let's get into the mix. Let's talk about the history of acting. How did it begin? So way back in the day, we go to the prehistoric world. Long before written history, humans reenacted hunts, battles. And by the way, this is, who knows if this is 100% perfectly accurate. This is from a very detailed prompt that I entered in ChatGPT, and it broke it down to these 10 little phases. So I want to kind of talk about this and we can analyze this together. A person might temporarily become an animal, an ancestor, or a supernatural figure in a ceremony. The purpose was often religious, educational, communal, or magical, not simply entertainment. This may be the fundamental human impulse behind acting. They may become someone or something else so that the group can experience a story. Certainly. This could be obviously storytelling and conveying stories and sometimes teaching lessons through stories is a part of the way our brains are wired. Why, I don't know exactly, but that's part of how our brains are wired. And that is a lot of times how we like to convey information. But was it always that people felt the need to act out or take on characters, take on voices? Or was it at one time just communicating the information, you let your imagination do the rest? I don't know. But anyways, so we could say certainly these stories or historical events were acted out in some way as a teaching tool. But yeah, I do wonder, was it always, hey, we have to take on characters, put on costumes and reenact it, or you just tell the story, just like a book, or just like an orator might retell something? Why would you have to go on and take on the role, pretend to be somebody, as opposed to just tell it how it is? I don't know if that was always how it was, or this is something that evolved over time or was shown to us, or whatever it may be. I don't know. But if you think about it, there's no need. In fact, if you're putting on this overlay of somebody acting things out or carrying things out, you're actually taking away your own ability to imagine how things might have gone or looked or whatnot. You're actually telling everybody how it was, if that makes sense. Obviously, I'm not talking about cases where literal historical figures were recorded and you're shown those verbatim recordings, but you get what I'm saying? Your imagination otherwise can create the backdrop and the characters and the voices and all these things. But now you're saying, nope, everybody's going to remember it this particular way when it's conveyed that way. So I don't know if this was always how it was. This is what ChatGPT says. Okay, now we move on to ancient Greece. It becomes a formal art. They had festivals honoring Dionysus, the Greek god of, I think, wine. We were just talking about the Greek gods, me and my niece and nephew. Tradition credits Thespis around 534 BC with separating one performer from the chorus and having him portray an individual character, hence the word thespian. Okay, so this is maybe the first time a professional actor came into being. Greek tragedy and comedy then exploded. So this is around the time when acting really became big. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Aristophanes, I don't know how to pronounce his name, sorry. Actors wore masks and portrayed gods, kings, murderers, heroes, fools, etc. Theater became a way for society to examine morality, fate, politics, war, pride, suffering, and death. So maybe around this time you could say it's a great way to analyze these things. But another might be, this is a great way to present it, to get a general consensus, to go the way that whatever the powers that may have been at that time, the way they wanted the society and the public to perceive things. That may have been a great way to feed it to them, just like we have the media today, movies today, whatnot. And again, now we're not just telling a story. You could say, hey, we're upping the engagement level by acting it out, maybe. But again, when you read a book or when you absorb information, you can build that great narrative. Now you're taking that away, and now it's being presented to you, and it's being presented to you by people that are taking on a role. Am I making too much about acting being akin to deception? Maybe. But I think it's interesting. I think it's food for thought. Next, we go to Rome and the ancient world. Romans adopted Greek theater, but made entertainment increasingly spectacular. Okay, spectacular, bigger, more engaging. Professional performance existed, although actors often had relatively low social status. And acting was already morally controversial. Oh, this is interesting too. Critics questioned people who made their living by impersonation, emotional manipulation. See? So there was some awakening and awareness to the oddities of this profession. I don't remember reading this when I was putting this together, but there you go. Now, this part's really interesting. So theater disappears. So there's a massive collapse. The Rome's collapse. Theater kind of disappears. People get upset with it. They think it's related to immorality and paganism. But then it's brought back by the church. I mean, right here. So now they started reenacting these biblical stories, and priests later ordinary people portrayed Jesus, Mary, angels, demons, Noah, Adam, Eve. Mystery plays and morality plays became extremely popular. Again, to me, this has a nefarious purpose, a nefarious intent to push a particular narrative, to push on these Christian ideals. I think that says a lot right there. So pretending to be someone else became a method of teaching religious, quote unquote, truth, let's say, quote unquote. Now we come up to this point, Renaissance professional acting returns. Italy developed commedia dell'arte, whatever that is, with professional traveling actors and recurring comic characters. Society's clearly accepted the paradox. Something fictional can communicate something true. Can it? Really? Or can it communicate something that is needed to be communicated by the powers that be? I mean, certainly fictional things can communicate true things. Is that the best mode or means by which to do so? Hamlet never existed, but jealousy, grief, ambition, betrayal, and mortality certainly do. That's the example. Professional theater spread through Europe and America. Acting gradually moved away from exaggerated gestures and declamation towards psychologically believable characters. So it becomes less out there. And again, getting closer and closer to trying to portray reality. Blurring, this is what I'm talking about, blurring the lines between fact and fiction, between real and fake. What are the effects of this? Like, I wonder if you have people that grow up in a world without any exposure to TV or movies. I wonder if they could do some sort of a test in terms of how well they're able to detect deception, detect lies. I'm sure that experiment has never been done, but that would be that's a really fascinating question to explore. In the late 1800s, thinkers such as Constantine argued that actors should genuinely understand a character's motivations and emotions rather than merely imitate them. Yeah, this is method acting. I've heard of method acting, yeah. At this point, the actor increasingly becomes an artist whose instrument is his or her own body, voice, personality, and emotions. Now we get into the late 1800s, and people are now starting to use photographs to create the illusion of movement. And initially, movies were astonishing simply because photographs moved, workers leaving a factory, a train arriving, people walking. Then filmmakers realized, oh, we can tell stories with this. So now we're getting into the movie era. Movies become narrative art in the early 1900s. Actors originally performed somewhat like stage actors because movies were silent. Their gestures had to communicate what audiences couldn't hear. This is the beginning of silent movies, Charlie Chaplin and all this stuff. Human beings could now watch someone pretending to be another person without that performer even being physically present. Okay. We know where that's going. Now, movies are starting to get to like what we have today. In the 1920s through the 60s, Hollywood developed an enormous industrial storytelling machine. This is when movies were starting to get popularized and pushed. Studios manufactured stars, produced westerns, romances, gangster films, musicals, war movies, blah, blah, blah. And then now we have the modern era. Cinema has become one of humanity's dominant cultural languages. Film schools, independent cinema, blockbuster franchises, all this stuff have progressively blurred the line between recording reality and constructing imaginary realities. And so here we are today. Now, at a minimum, I know it's obvious that we can say that this art form has been commandeered. At a minimum, commandeered and utilized to push certain agendas, certain propaganda in very subtle ways oftentimes. We can say that at a minimum. But the more interesting question is the whole idea of acting in movies and TV and drama and television inherently a method to not just distract? I mean, obviously distraction is there, like that's a given. It's not even about that. I'm just saying inherently it's this whole idea that has become so commonplace in our life, inherently problematic, because as we engage with this type of acting, being fake, being something other than you are, does that automatically disrupt our ability to discern, disrupt our ability to detect deception, which can then obviously, as we're now learning in everything that we've learned thus far, detecting deception might be the most important thing to us, period, in this life and beyond, in this incarnation and beyond, I should say. As one of the main principles on this channel, as we've talked about, is I've come to a pretty solid belief at this point, let's just say that we are immortal, that we exist beyond this life, all throughout time. But yeah, if discernment, if deciphering between fact and fiction, true and false, is the most important thing, we need to think about whether or not engaging in any of this type of acting, fakeness, period. Even if it's a great movie, incredible movie, telling a really important story, we need to think about whether this is inherently harming us in that way. And I don't know the answer ultimately, but I'd love to know people's thoughts in the comments. Have you thought about this? Has anybody else came to this same potential conclusion? And if so, I'd love to hear from you guys. Now, it's one thing to, if you're watching a documentary, again, people, that's communication. We're telling each other things. We're communicating with each other. That's one thing. Listen to a podcast. But I'm saying it's another thing when you're hearing people or you're watching shows or movies and you know people are acting. They're pretending to be something that they're not. Is that polluting our minds? I'm starting to think it does, but I don't know for sure. But that's what I'm starting to think. So I'm going to go with this. I'm going to ride this out. I'm going to roll with this aversion that I've developed watching shows, watching TV, watching movies. And I'm going to say it's my higher self rejecting all this stuff. That's what I think. That's what I think for now. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining. Please, I really want input on this. If you give me your input and your feedback and your thoughts, I'd love to hear it. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.